They blamed me, their eyes sharp with disappointment as the words crashed down on me like a wave. Fingers pointed, voices raised, I was cornered. But then, those cold, glaring security screens unfurled the truth, and everything changed. Someone else was the thief. The harsh, sterile air of the interrogation room wrapped around me like a suffocating veil. Accusations of theft whispered louder than the flickering fluorescent lights overhead, each flicker like a crack in my resolve. Their eyes bore into me, heavy with expectation, hungry for a confession I couldn't give. I hadn't taken the money. The truth lingered just out of reach, veiled in shadows and creeping doubt, while their words painted a vivid portrait of guilt across my mind. This felt like a cruel game, one where the puppeteer was unseen, pulling strings that tightened around my sanity. Was the truth all that mattered, or was I already condemned to wear their mistrust like a permanent mark? The answer lay in the unblinking stare of the camera perched in the corner. If only it could see the truth hidden in the shadows that I couldn't yet grasp. The fluorescent light flickered above me like a wavering pulse as I sat in the chair across from my manager. My heart was a chaotic beat in my chest, each thud threatening to burst through my ribs. When he spoke, his words felt like they were echoing from a distance. "Do you know why you're here?" His eyes were sharp, searching my face for something I wasn't even sure was there. I shook my head, the lie catching in my throat. I couldn't find my voice. It was buried beneath the growing weight in my stomach. He leaned forward, the squeak of his chair eerily loud in the suffocating silence. "We've noticed discrepancies. Money missing from the register." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The room shrank around me, walls closing in like they were conspiring in this nightmare. I could feel the heat of every gaze, invisible yet piercing, as if the whole world was watching and judging. I started, but my voice trailed off, swallowed by the thickness in my throat. My words stumbled over themselves, drowning in the rising tide of panic as I tried to protest, each breath a silent scream against their unforgiving glares. "There has to be some mistake," was all I could manage when I finally found my voice again, though it cracked like glass under pressure. He folded his hands, a patient, deliberate motion that felt colder than ice. The accusation hung in the air, an unspoken verdict that only grew heavier with every passing second. "Do you seriously think I'd do something like this?" I insisted, my voice rising despite the urge to keep it steady. I couldn't draw the lines deeper in my palm where my nails were digging in, my only anchor to reality. I scanned his face for a hint of empathy, doubt, anything, but it was as unreadable as stone. The silence was interminable, broken only by the ticking of the wall clock, marking time with ruthless indifference. Every tick felt like it counted down to something I wasn't ready for, a judgment I couldn't face. I should have stayed calm, but desperation clawed at my insides, urging me to make them hear me, see the truth I was living. "Check the cameras," I pleaded, my voice choked with a raw blend of fear and frustration. "I wouldn't." "The cameras show nothing conclusive," he interrupted, a firm finality in his tone that was more potent than any shouting could have been. My mouth opened but closed again without a sound. What words were there left to say when the truth seemed so unreachable, to everyone, maybe even to myself? Then, with a quiet sigh that felt like a judge's gavel, he slid a paper across the table towards me. My eyes blurred, unfocused, as I stared down at it. An ultimatum dressed up as a choice, resignation or investigation. I was trapped, crushed by the knowledge that whatever innocence I held was irrelevant here. My lungs screamed for air, the room growing colder with every breath I failed to take properly. Somewhere deep inside, anger flickered like a candle against the wind, but the prevailing emotion was still, inescapably, betrayal. Their eyes were knives, carving away the layers of trust and camaraderie we'd forged, leaving only bloodied suspicion in their wake. Seated at that long, imposing conference table, each polished surface and sleek line seemed alien, like walls of a cell about to close in. The projector whirred softly, but its hum was lost under the weight of the silence that swelled, oppressive and thick. I could barely meet their eyes, those eyes that once held laughter, shared dreams and late-night brainstorming sessions. Now, they were predatory, hunting for flaws, for secrets, for sins I hadn't committed. My heartbeat pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs, my breath shallow, trying desperately not to betray the panic clawing its way up my throat. "We need to talk about the discrepancies," James muttered finally, his voice low but carrying the weight of a gavel striking. The warmth that usually colored his voice was gone, replaced with something icy and detached. I nodded, trying to act normal, to act innocent. Wasn't I innocent? But each shift of my eyes met a cold stare, an unspoken accusation. My hands were kept meticulously still, folded before me, the skin around my knuckles drawn tight. The documents lay scattered across the table, stark white amongst the cool blues and grays. The papers bore numbers and charts, but to me they turned indecipherable, their meanings twisting into shapes I no longer recognized. As if in slow motion, I watched Sarah lean forward. Her hands were neatly manicured, but I imagined claws hidden beneath each well-groomed nail. She cleared her throat, stealing the air from the room for a moment longer. We've cross-verified with the other departments. The discrepancies match your accounts. Her words dropped like stones into the stagnant room. My own voice felt caught in an intangible web, sticky threads that silenced any plea, any protest. There was a vague murmuring of agreement around the table, and I realized that even the silence had become hostile. I tried to swallow, to find something solid in my throat to anchor my thoughts. There must be a mistake, I insisted, though my voice felt distant, like it belonged to someone else entirely. I never. James's eyes never left mine. We're all under a lot of pressure, but this is serious. I wanted to scream, to shake each of them until my truth shattered their hardened masks. But instead, all that came out was a breath. I felt it shudder as my lungs deflated, a sigh of defeat before the trial had even started. The room seemed to tilt, their faces swimming in the growing murk of my own doubt and paranoia. Each suspicion, unvoiced, added another link to the noose tightening around me. As they continued, their words blurred, merging into a hollow ringing, a relentless toll on my consciousness. It was as if the walls themselves were leaning in, narrowing, and for a fleeting moment, I wondered if this was how betrayal staked its claim. Quiet, insidious, leaving you questioning even the ground beneath your feet. Late afternoon sun slants through the half-open blinds, casting stripes across the living room floor like some surreal prison. I closed the door behind me gently, though the dull click echoes through the silence. Home, but not really, a place meant to be familiar now feels alien. My skin is turned raw from hours of wrestling with my own thoughts, each step heavy with a burden I'm not sure is mine. I move to the couch, sinking into its worn embrace, as if it might offer the solace I so desperately need. Instead, it holds the weight of history, of conversations replayed too many times. Words spoken in anger, promise, and deceit swirl like ghosts in my head, taunting me, as though the very air here has absorbed my past regrets and now breathes them back at me. In the fragmented silence of my apartment, shadows morphed into specters of doubt, whispering my worst fears as I lay awake in the dark. I murmur to the empty room, as if speaking aloud might dispel them. My gaze drifts to the ceiling, where cracks form patterns that used to be comforting, a testament to the passage of time, like rings in an ancient tree. Now they only remind me of fractures I cannot mend. I feel a pang, sharp and sudden, at the thought of everything that could have been, all the futures I imagined with people I've now pushed away. I rise, propelled by an unnameable urge, and drift to the small kitchen. Every routine movement, filling the kettle, slipping a cup from the cupboard, reeks of numb familiarity. I watch the steam rise, tendrils twisting into nothingness, and it feels like a metaphor too heavy-handed to ignore. The ticking clock on the wall seems to mock me, relentless in its advance, while my life stays stuck in this moment, unable to move forward or retreat fully into the past. When I finally take my tea to the window, the world outside is fading into evening. Neighbors' homes glow with the warmth of connection, a stark contrast to my self-imposed solitude. There's something insidiously comforting about this isolation, this cocoon of quiet suffering. But oh, how it bites. A memory surfaces without warning, laughter shared with a friend I've lost. It hits with the force of a blow, the kind you see coming but never dodge in time. The tea turns bitter on my tongue, and I set it down, untouched. I press my palm to the cool glass, hoping for its clarity, its purity to transfer to me, to soothe the cacophony inside. I imagine the outside world seeping through, filling me with its rush of life and hope. But it's all just imagination. Shadows deepen as night takes its unwilling hold, and I remain rooted here, steeped in loneliness and clarity, a truth harsher and sharper than any I've known. Their touch was gentle, yet it carried an unbearable weight, as if their fingers might pull away should the truth rest between us untold. We sat on the edge of the bed, the room dim save for the weak light struggling through the half-open blinds. I could hear the rhythmic ticking of the clock punctuating the silence between us, each second stretching like an accusation. "Are you sure it was you?" they asked softly, their voice a strange mix of concern and something brittle. I glanced sideways, catching a glimpse of their profile, a face sculpted by anxiety, by a wound they hadn't ever expected to bear. "I've never been more certain," I whispered, but even the words turned sour as they left my mouth, their regurgitated reassurances offering little solace. The room smelled of old books and last night's dinner, with a faint trace of the lilies they'd bought days ago beginning to wilt on the nightstand. their fragrance thick like regret. They turned towards me, eyes dark and searching in the dimness. I could feel their gaze probing, seeking the familiarity of a shared life, but only finding the shadows of doubt laid bare between us. A chill crept up my spine, my skin prickling in the stillness of the moment. "I want to believe you," they said, their voice breaking just a little, like a note played off-key. "But this," they gestured weakly, the words hanging, incomplete, their conclusion unspeakable. I felt the ground beneath the bed shifting, as though this foundation we'd built together was sliding away, one betrayal at a time. Memories once treasured felt tainted somehow, as if overshadowed by this newfound uncertainty. I could taste the metallic tang of fear at the back of my throat, and for a moment, I fought the urge to flee the room, to leave behind this suffocating stagnancy. But I stayed, my heart heavy with the wills to trust and be trusted, to salvage something from the ruin around us. I reached for their hand, fingers finding fingers, the contact a fragile lifeline to something we both feared might be vanishing. "Aren't we stronger than this?" I implored, my voice barely more than a breath. It felt like throwing a lifebuoy into turbulent waters, hoping against hope that it might hold. Their eyes flickered with a tempest of emotions, warring between belief and betrayal. Moments like these, the ones you never imagine in your goodnight goodbyes, in the whispered promises that try to bind two people together against the world. Finally, they sighed, a weary, aching release, and squeezed my hand with a desperation that mirrored my own. "I'm here, aren't I?" they murmured, but I could feel the tremor in their grip, uncertainty creeping into the spaces where certainty once resided. The room was silent now, save for our breathing, synchronized yet separate, as we sat there together, haunted by the specter of a question unanswered. The room is dark except for the faint glow of my laptop screen, bathing me in a ghostly, blue light. I sit back in the worn chair, its creak breaking the silence, a chorus that echoes the disquiet in my mind. It's late, the kind of late that blurs into early, when the world shuts its eyes and dreams of more forgiving things. And then it hits me, like a wave of cold water crashing over me. I remember the cameras. Those silent, unblinking eyes in the ceiling. The store's cameras. With trembling fingers, I search for the company's security footage policy online, each click and scroll a lifeline in the gathering storm. Surely there's something there, I murmur to myself. Proof that I didn't do what they said. I envisioned the footage playing out. I'd gone to buy that stupid pack of batteries. How mundane, how brutally ordinary the moment seemed. But now I see myself again under those fluorescent lights, replaying every step, every interaction. Did my hands brush against the stranger's, my face betray a passing flicker of acknowledgement? Or was it all just a cruel twist of perception and memory? I can almost hear the hum of the store above the panic in my veins, the clattering of carts, the murmur of conversations that mean nothing now. And I see it. The scene unfolds with heart-wrenching clarity. The stranger, the accusation. Their voice firm, unwavering, became the judge of what I knew to be an unspoken trial. My own voice, in contrast, feels like a fading echo, swallowed by the shadows of doubt and disbelief. I'm standing there again, defending an innocence that seemed to dissipate into thin air. But it wasn't just words. I need more than words. I need something undeniable, something that doesn't morph through the twisted lens of interpretations and assumptions. The cameras, they must have captured it all, every subtle movement, every flicker of truth. Proof. I breathe out, feeling the desperation leaping from my throat like a prayer, a plea. From the outside, it looks like hope might finally pierce through the oppressive gray that's clouded my mind. But the flicker is fragile. Doubt is still there, laced in every heartbeat, reminding me of how the world can run roughshod over reality, leaving nothing but fragments of identity in its wake. Minutes turn into hours, my mind spinning tales of salvation and ruin. The recording room is reachable, I just have to find the way. But even as the thought dares to light my darkness, uncertainty claws back. What if my narrative is warped beyond recovery in the digital gaze of those cameras? Or worse, what if there's nothing at all? But like a drowning soul glimpsing the surface, I clung to the thought of those silent eyes in the ceiling, praying they captured the truth that refused to be seen, yearning to cradle that truth, to offer it to a world that still felt implacably cold. The morning chill bit at my skin as I pushed open the glass doors of the department store. It had been a sleepless night, a marathon of thoughts chasing each other like tidal waves in my mind. As I stalked past rows of perfectly folded sweaters and mannequins frozen in careless poses, my heart thudded like a war drum in my chest, each beat a reminder of the uncertainty clawing at my resolve. I caught a glimpse of myself in one of the mirrors, wild-eyed and more alive than I could remember feeling in months. This was it, the moment I'd been nodding my courage around. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed, a a fitting soundtrack to the anxiety threading through every nerve. When I reached the back office, the door was ajar, spilling slants of yellow light onto the scuffed tile floor. My manager, Michael, a wiry man with a permanent crease between his brows, was hunched over paperwork, the tension in his posture mirroring my own. The scent of stale coffee hung in the air, blending with the sharper smell of desperation I imagined emanating from my skin. I didn't knock. Pushing the door all the way open, I stepped inside, the bottom edge scraping audibly against the floor. He looked up, surprise flashing in his eyes before he squinted in suspicion. "Can I help you?" His voice held the clipped edge of a man used to control, comfortable with wielding authority like a cudgel. I took a breath, grounding myself in the threshold between flight and fight. "I need to see the surveillance tapes," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Pausing, he adjusted his glasses, peering at me as if searching for the cracks in my conviction. "Why?" The question was sharp, the single word slicing through the air. Why? The moment loomed ahead of me like a chasm. What if I didn't find what I was looking for? What if the truth was worse? "Something was taken from me," I replied, my words forming a fragile bridge over the void of consequences. "And I need to know." His eyes softened slightly, a crack in his otherwise stern facade, and for a moment, I thought I'd found an ally. But then, he sighed, shaking his head. "Those tapes aren't for staff. It's a matter of protocol." Desperate heat flared under my skin. "Michael, please. This is important. Just one look." Time stretched taut between us, his silence a void threatening to swallow my resolve whole. Then, unexpectedly, he leaned back in his chair, the worn leather creaking beneath him. "All right. You have 10 minutes. Relief flooded my veins, the tide of anxiety receding just enough to catch a breath. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and he turned to lead the way, his pace brisk and his resolve still tangible, yet softened by the flicker of understanding in his eyes. Each grainy frame flickered on the screen, the room dimly lit as if secrecy could seep through the walls themselves. My heart, it lurched with each playback, the thud in my chest so loud I feared everyone could hear it over the whispering whir of the old monitor. This was it, the moment the truth was supposed to break free from its prison of suspicion and whispered lies. I leaned forward, my breath shallowing to the rhythm of the clicking frames. There it was, a figure, shadowed and hooded, moving with a casual deftness I could never muster. It was surreal, like watching a ghost pluck the heart from its life. Vindication was so close, yet still, disbelief clung to me like a damp coat, refusing to let go. "There, stop it there," I muttered, trying to keep the edge from my voice. The operator paused the footage, the blurred thief caught mid-action, hand in the till, stealing from right under my nose. My eyes narrowed, trying to burn the image into my brain. This wasn't me. Finally, this wasn't me. Someone clapped me on the back, murmuring, "Well, it's not like we really thought it was you." The words barely grazed my consciousness, their forced optimism falling on deaf ears. Relief poured in like a slow leak, subtle at first, before threatening to flood my system. It clashed with an avalanche of resentment at how long it took, how long I had to endure the side glances and half-hearted smiles. The room was filled with awkward shuffles, the others unsure what to do with the physical embarrassment now displaced. I turned toward the low hum of whispered apologies, my mouth dry, frustration tangling with the faint taste of overdue justice. There was triumph here, somewhere beneath the layers of exhaustion and the remnants of doubt that still clung like cobwebs. The door opened, letting in a gust of even colder air, snapping me back to the fact that this wasn't over. Yes, I was free from the weight of their false accusations, but the scars ran deeper, as if etched into my very core. Even now, the thought flitted through, how they hadn't stood by me, hadn't bothered to look harder sooner. Another voice, softer, pulled me from the depths of my tormented thoughts. "You didn't deserve this." I barely nodded, my throat tight, eyes locked on the screen as if daring it to reverse course, to unmask someone else. The bittersweet tang of relief mingled with the raw, lingering wound of betrayal I would nurse long after this day. Yet, here I was, triumph tarnished with uncertainty, left to piece together the broken parts they had dismantled with their doubts. I exhaled slowly, watching, waiting, as the screen went black, the culprit's shadow forever imprinted in my memory, like a tattoo I hadn't asked for. My breath finally steady, though my heart still pounded with the rhythm of a war I wasn't sure I had won. The room had an eerie calm about it, like the silence before a storm that never quite breaks. Sitting there, I felt the eyes of my coworkers darting around the table, avoiding mine as if meeting my gaze would confirm their complicity. My manager, a portly man with perpetually flushed cheeks, cleared his throat, a sound like gravel scraping steel. Sorry," he finally uttered, each word like a boulder being pushed uphill. We acted on incorrect information. There it was, the apology I had been waiting for, delivered with all the sincerity of a politician's promise. His eyes skittered around the room, landing anywhere but on me. My fingers flexed against the cool surface of the polished conference table. I leaned back, my silence cutting through the tension like a knife. "You threw me under the bus," I said, my voice steady, though my heart pounded against my ribs like a trapped bird. "And now, what? We just pretend like this never happened." A shuffle of feet, a nervous cough from Brian, the guy who'd been so quick to throw his accusation in my direction when this mess began. I could feel their discomfort, an almost living entity that wormed its way around the room. "We didn't know," Lisa mumbled from the corner, her voice small and lost beneath her veil of auburn hair. I turned my gaze fully on her. "You didn't know, or you didn't care to find out until after the damage was done?" Silence. It stretched so thin I thought it might snap and cut us all. The truth was out there now, naked and unadorned. "Proof may have cleared my name," I continued, "but trust, that's another matter." Their apologies stung, as hollow as the eyes that refused to meet mine. But this wasn't about them anymore. This was about reclaiming a part of myself they thought they could take away. I stood, releasing the chair from my white-knuckled grip. "I'll be around," I said, allowing the tiniest edge of triumph to color my words. "We're a team, remember?" The stab of irony in my voice wasn't lost on anyone. As I walked toward the door, a memory flashed, my late nights in this very room, the countless times I'd taken on extra work to lighten their load. Slick with sweat, fueled by nothing more than caffeine and stubborn determination, I gave everything. Now, the stark emptiness of those efforts loomed, a monument to misplaced trust. In the hallway, I paused. The air in here was clearer, the muffled buzz of distant phones and shuffling papers a soundtrack to a day that already felt different. I didn't look back. Trust, once fractured, might never fully heal. But respect can be rebuilt. With every step back to my office, I told myself this was just the beginning of proving it. Alone in the quiet of my room, the world's clamor finally dimmed to a whisper. I stood before the mirror, the ghostly reflection staring back at me. My face was pale, framed by shadows that had been strangers for too long. I leaned in closer, searching for something in the eyes that seemed brighter, more alive than they had any right to be. A deep breath shuddered through me, reaching into the parts where fear had made its home. The familiar ache in my chest pulsed with memories, each heartbeat a thump of unresolved things once buried out of convenience, now surfacing. I felt every betrayal, every moment of doubt, flash through me. But this time, they didn't sting as sharply. I pressed my palms against the cool glass, savoring the solidity of the contact. "You've got this," I murmured, almost like a prayer. My words hung in the air, fragile yet firm, wrapping around me like a comforting cloak. I had needed to hear them when others were too busy casting shadows of doubt over my resolve. Looking deeper, I could see beyond the tears that so often blurred the clarity of my focus, past the ridicule that I had once let shape me. There was strength in what was real, not in the stories that others had written over my own. The person in the mirror was a tapestry of experiences, threaded with the vibrant colors of survival, a canvas yet unfinished but defiant, nonetheless. Outside the window, the first streaks of dawn began to breach the horizon. The sky was painted with hues of orange and purple, a silent reminder that night was never forever. I took another breath, finding solace in the rhythmic rise and fall of my chest. The routine voices in my head, the ones that replayed old conversations, echoing doubt, faded into whispers. I allowed myself to sit in the silence of where I stood, absorbing the power in simply being. This is what an ending feels like, I thought, and a beginning too. The realization settled over me with a warmth that spread through my limbs. Instinctively, I reached for my phone, fingers hovering over the screen, ready to delete the messages that had shackled me to a past fabricated by words of others. But I paused, opting to let them stay, but without power over me now. Each notification was a badge, a reminder of battles fought, not signs of defeat. In the mirror's reflection, I found not a victim, but a survivor, resolute against the tide of judgment and ready to reclaim my narrative, I whispered, and the truth of it unfurled within me, weaving into the fiber of my being. I pulled back from the mirror, the lines of a smile slowly finding their way onto my face. Closing my eyes, I let the morning light wash over me completely. With each passing second, I felt less like who I had been told I was and more like who I chose to become. And in that choice, I found a strange, beautiful assurance that I could write the rest of my story,